Hello, class. Today I am going to give you some instruction about how to approach an impromptu speech, which is something that we are going to tackle very soon. When it comes to an impromptu speech, this usually happens when you are not given a lot of time to prepare, as in you are given just a few minutes sometimes, or maybe you're at an event and you're told that you're going to speak, or someone says, hey, why don't you say something about this? When you're in a meeting or when you're in a classroom, and you have to, on the spot, come up with something to say. There are ways to prepare yourself for these times. Now, you can't prepare for that particular speech, but you can prepare by practicing. And so that's what we're going to do in this class, is practice impromptu speaking, which is one of the more probably common skills that you're going to use. Not often are you preparing a persuasive speech unless it's for school or you go into some kind of career where you need to persuade people, like in law or something like that. So this type of speech you will have over the course of your life, where someone will say, hey, can you say something about this? And you're going to need to come up with a good way of approaching it. So I have some advice for you. This is Weaver's advice, having done lots of impromptu speeches. In fact, teaching is oftentimes impromptu speaking, where a student will ask a question and I have to come up with a response on the spot. And there are ways to do that. So here's my advice to you. Number one, try to establish a purpose. There are three types of purposes that you could have with an impromptu speech. You could just be to inform someone of something. It could be to persuade someone, or to honor or entertain someone. We call that a special occasion. So if it's like a special occasion, you might be at a wedding and someone says, hey, why don't you say something about the bride? Okay, you're not giving an informative or persuasive speech at that point. You're trying to honor the occasion. So there are lots of different times where you could use any of those three purposes. So you want to keep in mind, okay, why am I doing this, first of all? Why am I giving this speech? That's the purpose. The second point is, whatever the topic is, you want to try to figure out, how can I connect with this topic? Now, it might be that the connection is that you know a lot about it, and so you can inform. It might be the connection is you have a personal story about it. It might be the connection is you have a story that's kind of funny, or you know of a parable, or you know of a story or an illustration or a joke, anything that kind of connects to it where you can grab your audience, okay? So you want to brainstorm immediately, what can I say about this from my own personal experience and from my own knowledge? Both of those are key in creating a good impromptu speech. Next, try to come up with two or three points of discussion, call them, or points of a speech that you can do, so that the speech feels like a true speech, not just you rambling. And the way to do that is to have transitions from one point to the next, so the audience feels like they are on a journey with signposts coming to a destination, not just hearing you ramble. Okay? So that's a skill. By the way, we're going to practice these. Try to come up with an interesting start. The start could be a joke, let's say, if you had one. Or it could be a story, a personal story, a personal connection. Those are often good ones, but there's lots of ways to start. Now, if you really don't have anything and you don't have any time, then you can just start with a point that you have, and that's okay. Next, if you have time, jot down some notes. So let's say you are at a meeting and you're told at the beginning of the meeting, hey, I need you to talk about this topic because you know a lot about it. Boom! Get out a piece of paper and start jotting down, okay, what do I want to make sure I hit in this particular presentation? Okay? And then finally, practice. Practice giving impromptu speeches. The more you practice, the better you get. When I started teaching, I was pretty horrible at it, actually, because I did not have the opportunity to practice in front of students very often. Now I've gotten much better at it, but I have a long way to go. And it's that way with impromptu speaking. You never arrive. You just keep practicing and you keep trying. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to demonstrate giving an impromptu speech. We'll see how this goes. My son is here today, and I'm going to ask him to give me a topic about anything, and I have to give an impromptu speech about it. I'm going to establish a purpose. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to try to make it interesting, and I have no time to prepare at all, so I can't jot anything down. So, Christopher, what's my topic for my impromptu speech?
A devil.
A devil. Well, that's disturbing. All right. So, I might incorporate an angel. Thank you. But a devil, okay? Hell. No one likes to talk about hell. No one likes to think about hell. But for some reason, in our society, the topic of devils is not so offensive, and I find that very interesting. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the allure to this concept of devils, where we see that in society, and why perhaps it's not such a offensive, taboo thing to talk about anymore, which at one time it probably was. First of all, the concept of devils became more palatable because of the art that was used to show them. Starting way back in ancient times, when they would try to create some image of a devil, they would put on the devil like some kind of a trident or a fork. They would give a pointy tail. They would give pointy teeth. And they would incorporate all of these weird and kind of lizard-like details in the image of a devil. And you might think, well, that would make it more scary. But on the other hand, because it becomes less human, the devil does, less human-like and more animal-like, it's actually not as difficult to imagine because it's not like us. The more it's like us, the more disturbing they actually get, I think. So nobody wants to think of humans as evil, but to think of some animal as evil isn't as hard to think about. So that's one reason why they become less offensive in our society. The other reason is because of sports, obviously. You got the Blue Devils of Duke. You got the Devils even in high school sports like Brookville. And so because people say it a lot, it's not as hard to do. Just like if you start cussing. When you start cussing, with the first or second, third time you do it, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't feel comfortable doing that. But after a while, you're like, it's just part of my vocabulary. I'm not saying that's good, but I am saying that that's kind of human nature, that once you get something becomes common, it's a lot easier to do. That also includes lying. So don't start lying, because then it becomes easier to do. And then you become corrupt. Don't do that. But that's just a side note, just a little bit of Weaver advice. Finally, the last reason why this idea of devils is not as offensive is because our society's become less religious. Let's be honest. Our country, Europe, used to be ingrained in Judeo-Christian values, symbols, theology, policy, philosophy, and as that has started to erode and we come into a more postmodern society where you're told you can just kind of invent your own truth, then you can take things that used to be seen as part of the real truth and fabric of society, and you can just kind of play with it. And so people start to use devils in comedy. They start to use devils in costumes, and it just becomes part of society that's looked at more of like this lore from the past rather than something that's actually scary. So those are the reasons why it's become a lot easier to talk about and think about and draw devils, as my son, even just now, was drawing pictures of devils eating people. Now, I don't know why he was doing that. We'll go to counseling. But that is probably, there's this picture. Look, I even had a visual aid. That is why. So that's how you do an impromptu speech. What did I do? I established a purpose. I decided I was going to inform. I connected to it. The first thing I thought about was Halloween costumes. And then I started thinking about the sports teams. But then I got into, okay, why are those in my mind? This is what's going on in my mind as I'm establishing the speech. I'm thinking to myself, why are those things like, those are like, devils are, they're not good, they're bad, right? So why are we seeing them in society? And then I think, okay, maybe it started with art and how it became, once you have something on paper or something in paint, it's something that you can see, and it's not something that's like in your imagination or something that you're going to be really afraid of, because you can put it out there and look at it, okay? So anyway, so I established my points, okay? Now, I was kind of establishing them as I went. Sometimes it's good to give a preview. If you can think in your mind, okay, here are my 3 things that I'm going to say about it, and you say that right after you have your catchy introduction, then people can follow your speech better. But I wasn't able to do that this time. I would have if I had more time, okay? My catchy introduction, I thought, What's something that's going to get people's attention? Nobody likes to talk about hell, but people like to talk about devils. So I thought, hey, that's probably a good introduction. And then finally, I didn't have time to write down notes. And I practiced this a lot, obviously, right? Okay? Because I give a lot of impromptu speeches. So I hope that speech was interesting to you and it made you think, because that would be my goal here, is to inform and make you think. So I hope as we continue doing these impromptu speeches, you're able to get more comfortable. It won't be as scary, and we'll practice a lot. And I will give you time to write down notes, and you can bring those up and have those in front of you when you give your impromptu speech. All right? All right. Let's get to work doing impromptu speeches. It's going to be great.